What's up, y'all? Here it is, the Daily Chronicles. Stick around for a special announcement. Actually, not even around. It'll be before the show. But here's that little funny intro thing. Cue that stupid music. Are you a cannabis grower who knows what they're doing? Are you looking for a one-stop shop for all things cannabis lighting? Then check out DutchLightingInnovations.com. On our website, you can learn more about our newest UV technology, which allows us to grow stronger, even better terpene profiles while reducing microbial growth. DutchLightingInnovations.com has all your lighting needs, from HPS to CMH to LED and UV. Lights of the highest quality for growers who know what they're doing. Designed, engineered, and made in Holland. Your one-stop shop for all things cannabis, DutchLightingInnovations.com. You can learn more about our newest UV technology. At DLI, we have decades in experience in both commercial and hobby horticulture. As a result, our engineers have developed a brand new range of horticultural lighting products that combine with the tried and tested manufacturing techniques of the existing commercial lighting products with a modern manufacturing process. As a result, we've created a comprehensive line of horticultural lighting products that are designed to enhance user experience and produce better results. That's DutchLightingInnovations.com. Cool, y'all. So definitely go check out DutchLightingInnovations.com. They're one of our newest sponsors for the show. Huge shout out to all of them. Yeah, man, y'all gonna see some different changes around here. You're gonna see some different faces, some different kinds of content. You might start noticing that the walls are starting to look better, if you will. Yeah, man, that's because we're actually making a change for y'all. Real quick, before we get to this week's episode, I did want to point out that in the beginning of this, I actually got Dr. Larry Norris's name wrong. I called him Norton because it popped up on my, I don't know why. There's no excuse for it. I was really stoned, so if you want to use that, it's fine. But hey, Larry, Dr. Larry Norris, I do apologize about that. There's no harm, no foul, I understand. But still, you know, we're trying to get as close to perfection as we can, right? But definitely check out the episode. It's one of the most informative episodes I've ever done, covering topics that I'm wildly interested about, you know. And so instead of careening, you know, by myself down the internet trying to answer these questions for myself, you know, just guessing, go straight to the source and talk to Dr. Larry Norris. So without any other further ado, y'all, here it is, the episode, Dr. Larry Norris.
All throughout history, the term stoner has been used a lot. In common usage, it refers to the guilty, the derelict, and the unsavory.
What's going on, my
The Oxford
jokers
Dictionary
and
redefines
smokers? Welcome back to
as a state where you have lost your ability to behave or think normally caused by a drug like marijuana or alcohol. I find that to be unacceptable. Welcome to the Daily Chronicles. Here we talk to different types of stoners from all walks of life. So roll up, load up your bongs, ready up that dab, and tune in as we speak the truth about the stigma. This is the Daily Chronicles.
What's going on, my tokers, jokers, and smokers? Welcome back to another edition of the Daily Chronicles, y'all. Today, well, really, my guest today doesn't need an introduction. Everybody knows who this man is. But for those of you who don't know, this is Mr. Larry Norton, co-founder of Decriminalize Nature nationwide. Larry, welcome to the show, man. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Rodney. Appreciate it. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Hey, thank you, man. Listen, Decriminalize Nature. We're gonna switch it up today, y'all. Typically, we talk about weed, and I'm sure we'll talk about weed down the line. But Decriminalize Nature. Now, that's shrooms, ethiogens. Am I forgetting? That's pretty much?
Yeah. So basically, looking at kind of a couple different categories. We have, we're using the term just like you mentioned in your conversation earlier. About the intro to this, talking about how there's words like stoner, which could mean a variety of different things. We want to kind of focus away from the words like psychedelic, and so we're using the word entheogen meaning sort of generating the divine within, or sort of the sacred inner experience, or the types of experiences that can emerge from these specifically plant and mushroom experiences. So mushrooms containing psilocybin would be one of those, cacti containing mescaline, plant combinations similar to ayahuasca that contain DMT, and plants that contain ibogaine are the four main categories. But there's quite a few plants that are in each of those categories. I think recently or not so long ago, there's some research looking at plant combinations similar to ayahuasca that contain DMT, because that's basically a modulation of DMT and MAOI. And there's close to 4,000 different plant combinations that could include. So it's quite a broad range, but since we're looking at just getting the compounds out, then we can really sort of explore plants in a bigger way and see, what plants out there could be entheogenic.
Listen, my dude, that right there is iconic. A lot of people don't realize. Yeah, I killed that. There it is. They don't realize how important, all of these other, I want to call it avenues of possibility, if I will be so bold to say, are. I have to, without anything further in the show, point out, I love your hat. Okay, support cognitive liberty. Holy shit, I got to get one of those fucking hats. I love the hat.
And here we have the cacti, or excuse me, the Banisteriopsis copy, the ayahuasca vine. This is the San Pedro cactus, then the mushrooms, and then the ibogaine. So they're all on there as well.
Listen, I'm always a fucking, voice for furthering thought, okay? Freeing thought. Anything that pushes the boundary, that fringe, whatever you gotta do to kind of, and I hate to say it, but, to be generic here, but break free, whatever you gotta do to heal yourself mentally, do it. You know what I mean? And if that includes ketamine, if that includes anything, aforementioned, including mushrooms and weed, y'all get it. You know what I'm saying? Therapy is cool, y'all. Okay, let's not shy away from this. At the same time, some people don't like it or don't need it. Listen, pick it for yourself. But today, I want to talk about Decriminalize Nature. Now, if I want to support Decriminalize Nature, what's the first thing that you would tell me to do? Obviously, go to a website or anything like that, and we're going to hear that, and that's cool. But what should I do if I've just stumbled across Decriminalize Nature and I'm like, oh, what is this? What's one thing that you hope that I pick up on?
Yeah, there's a couple other things I want to touch on, so I hope you don't mind if I do a little tangent here. I think you're right in terms of there's some people out here that have made some interesting points about the dynamic of therapy and plant medicines or mushroom medicines. And the person said something basically like, to paraphrase, when you're in a therapy session, you can still edit. Mm-hmm. Having these experiences, there's no editing. It's just you and the experience, and you gotta face your stuff, and you can't really choose your well, I'm going to think about this, or I'm only going to offer this information. It's all right there. It's all internal. You're seeing it. So I think while you agree, there's some people that can get value out of therapy. A lot of people maybe are resistant. A lot of times therapy has been very oppressive to a lot of different communities, so that's also challenging. And for me personally, sometimes I could imagine drooling on the floor, having a big experience with a therapist taking notes next day, so, you start spinning out and you're like, why are they taking notes? What's going on? What did I do? Right. So, there's a place for that in the future, but really what we want to focus on is decriminalization. Another thing that, I think you spoke to a little bit there about sort of freeing the mind and opening the mind is something we don't really talk about that much, but we really see ourselves being kind of on the forefront of, fighting for our agency of our own consciousness. We're talking about pharmaceutical companies getting access to these and saying, okay, we have to go do it through our model, and our model is patented. So even, they made claims for, they didn't get the patent, unfortunately, but they made claims on things like, if you're holding hands with the person, or if you're sitting on a couch, or if you're playing music, it's like, that's prior art from like centuries ago. What are you talking about, right? So when you have a dominant model that now has access to these medicines, and they're sort of interpreting the message that you're getting through their own lens, that could be problematic, especially when some of these lenses are authoritarian or, overrun, hyper-capitalist kind of mentality, consume, all that kind of stuff. So there's some challenges there, or even the mechanistic worldview that doesn't believe that the sacred exists. So all those kind of things kind of come into this idea that we're really doing is we're also sort of just like the cannabis movement is, really on the edge of fighting for consciousness. So we'll make sure that we have access to our own consciousness and that no one else can influence. You can't have corporate entities getting in the way or government entities getting in the way. It's your consciousness. You should be able to engage in it. And then that brings us into what is Decriminalize Nature. All those sort of ethos are part of it. Obviously, the first thing anyone can do, which is always helpful, if you want to donate, there's a big donate button on there. We'd love to get your support in that regard. So please reach out to us if you want to do that. And then there's a couple different layers and levels of things that people can do depending upon what their sort of abilities are or wants are, needs to volunteer, or time to volunteer is. One of them, for example, could be something as simple as contacting us on the website or decriminature@gmail.com. And, if you're a graphic artist, or you're an organizer, or, you want to help out some of those sort of national level things, helping write letter campaigns, all that kind of thing, we can kind of bring you in on the national level. But I think what's really the power of this movement is not centralized things. We really want to keep this a decentralized movement as much as possible. Granted, we do have sort of a hub, we do have sort of a central organization in regards to, we're the point people if people want to ask questions or bring somebody in. But at the end of the day, us here in the San Francisco Bay Area aren't really going to be able to tell you how to do work in Michigan. Michigan's going to have its own thing and its own vibe, that type of thing. And everyone, and again, we want to keep to some of the ethos, like nature-based, grow, gather, gift, all those different types of things. Yes, there's great that synthetics are happening, but again, that kind of gets you stuck in a pharma model because most likely someone's not going to be able to make that in their own house. We can grow mushrooms pretty easily. So we really want to make sure that we have access to, the plant power, mushroom power to the people, so to speak. So what we're doing across the U.S. now, we have 15 cities that have passed. Michigan is pretty prolific in that. They're actually leading the way to some degree in terms of cities that have passed, or they will be after their next city. I am a fellow Michigander, so I'll take a little bit of credit for that as well. Having grown up there once upon a time, went to school in Michigan, and
back in the day. I graduated there in '98, and they didn't really have anything in regards to this. It was still a conversation pretty stigmatized. But you also have hash bash. You also have a really strong social justice movement out there and understanding of plant movement out there. So I think that's been really part of it. And I think the community out there in Michigan has been really amazing too, just because you see everyone coming together and really sort of collaborating, which is unique. There's a lot of other places where maybe there's different agendas and different ideas, but everyone there really seems to be coming together, which I appreciate. Then I would say that we have about 50, 60 cities. So what those people do is like, hey, I'm in XYZ city, I really want to make this movement happen here. They contact us. Usually what we'll do is we'll send them an organizer's handbook, which has, basically our ethos, our approach, some templates that people can use, the resolution, which is kind of basically a copy paste of what happened in Oakland in 2019 when we passed originally. Varieties of things can change in different cities. Maybe the whereas clauses will change or something like that. But for the basic essence is the same. So it's really easy. It's super packageable for folks. It's just this template. We even have educational emails to send to the city council members. And really the idea here is the approach is a city council member approach. So you don't have to gather signatures, at least the way that we're doing it. There's some state level campaigns that are looking into different stuff in terms of gathering signatures, but on the city level, and really we think just like with cannabis, the city is an important first baseline to build the power to be able to have that conversation on state level that we can influence, not that's influenced by deep pockets who have another agenda.
So the more cities that we can pass with this type of decriminalization thing, the more power we have behind our movement to be able to have a bigger conversation at the state level. So basically what we do is really just give you all the tools you need, give you support in terms of how to talk to the city council. We have meetings with the city council with you as well, talk to the police chiefs and, the district attorneys and the city attorneys' offices and all those different types of things, figure out how to get on the agenda, get a sponsorship, and then move right into a win. So that's been pretty successful. In 3 years and during a pandemic, we've passed in 15 cities, which is kind of unheard of. When you look at some of the other things, the other policy that's been happening, it's taken quite a long time. So we do often definitely, stand on the shoulders of the cannabis work that's happened. And we're also learning from the cannabis work in terms of just seeing how I went from, like here, for example, we had Prop 215, which is this nice grassroots, caregiver program, really seeing the medicinal properties of cannabis as well as the other properties go into Prop 64, which is now a licensure mess, and big companies are coming in, and you need to pay 35% tax on cannabis here where I live right now, and it's kind of out of control. So we're learning that lesson from cannabis as well, is how do we make sure it keeps in the hands of the people, and then after decriminalization, actually make sure that the economies stay local too. So you can't just have somebody from a financial center come in and extract all the value out of the community, but it stays in the community, stays with the people that are there, and not only the value of healing, but also the value of economics. So those are some different things that we were working on. If people want to help out with any of that, we'd love to help you out. Like I say, we're growing pretty exponentially. We have just recently in the last couple months, a huge team is starting to form in the UK. We have people from France reaching out, people from South Africa reaching out, we had people downloading logo packets from Moscow, Russia. So this boomed into a pretty big phenomenon in just a little over 3 years. So it's been pretty amazing to kind of hold on to the horse, so to speak.
So it's what, www.decriminalizenature.com?
.org. Decriminalizenature.org, yep. Or you can go to our Instagram, is at Decriminalize Nature. Also a Facebook page with the same. And then
I created a scrolly thing.
Ah, perfect. Great.
There we go.
Nice work. Thank you.
Yeah. I could do it myself. No, I'm kidding. No, decriminalizenature.org, y'all. We're just going to keep it scrolling down there the entire rest of the show. Go donate. That's my shit, man. Like, that's my shit. Like, it's okay. I feel that I should probably touch on this. I do microdose. You know what I'm saying? That's something that you and I were talking about in the green room. Microdosing has definitely opened my mind to some possibilities that I would not have seen with pre-existing generalized anxiety disorder, okay, or whatever have you. When I microdose, I don't do it for the euphoria. I don't use it for the psychedelic effects and things. I use it for just that, my generalized anxiety. I have anxiety the same as everybody else, and mine's not worse than theirs, However, I've found something that works. Well, it's unfortunate that, 15 years ago, just even talking about the two could land you in some serious trouble. And now, we're trying to, and I hate to use this motherfucking term, boots on the ground, but it's the truth, we have to march against these people. I mean, because honestly, if we don't educate them, they don't know. A. B, we're seeing it work. Okay, I would much rather a veteran have access to something that's helping them versus you chastise. I mean, come on, they put their life on the line. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? How are you going to arrest that person, for smoking a joint or hell, doing an eighth of shrooms or whatever however they want to heal? They ain't hurting nobody. And that's kind of my vibe with it. That's why I can get behind Decriminalize Nature, y'all. So you best fucking bet I'm going to decriminalizenature.org. Seriously. Now, from the beginning till now, man, Larry, tell me, what's one thing you've learned? Like, take the mushrooms out of it. Take, at its core, from the beginning till now, what's one thing that you've kind of like really learned along the way?
All right. Well, so
not to kind of hit you with that broadside, but it helps me kind of get into it,
Yeah, totally. No, yeah. My path before policy was more academic. Okay. So I became very interested in this work, even when I was going to Michigan, trying to do this research, and nobody was doing it. But I was having mushroom experiences at the same time, and it was like, wow, I'm learning such different, because I studied neuroscience back in those days, which I had to do animal research, and I'm doing mushrooms. feeling how we're all one, and then waking up the next morning and torturing rats for a psych experiment.
Mycelium.
What am I doing, right? So that was it. That was so I took a long sabbatical. Kind of went, moved to Hawaii for about 11 years. Came across ayahuasca during that time. Became really fascinated by the transformative potential of those experiences, and decided to go to get my PhD. So I went to a transpersonal psychology school here out in San Francisco called California Institute of Integral Studies, which deals with a lot of topics beyond the sort of mechanistic psychology. What about spiritual psychology? What about consciousness beyond the mind, the Lucifer types of things? So that was really helpful. And I also started a nonprofit out here called Ethogenic Research Integration Education, which has been doing like integration circles in education for about a decade now, a little over. So that was kind of my path. And then we all kind of came together, and this is kind of like the origin story of Decriminalize Nature. We all kind of came together in late December 2018. And we were really coming together to talk about how can we create a conscious community of healing where people can come together, talk about these experiences, but we weren't thinking yet about the next stage, which is like, how are people going to get these experiences? How are we going to do in terms of policy? But in that conversation, we started talking about Denver and sort of the decriminalization ballot initiative that happened out there, and then the legalization of psilocybin therapy that was happening in Oregon. And we were like, kind of just bantering about those. And we were like, how would we do that here in Oakland? And what's the difference between decriminalization and legalization? Maybe that's something we can talk about in a bit. Mm-hmm. We really wanted to focus on a new approach, and not really just, look at just mushrooms, but actually bring in the bigger conversation, have a conversation about our relationship with nature, about our ancestral plant medicines that have been, across the world. Almost every sort of culture has worked with plants or mushrooms at some point, whether it's herbs, whether it's
every single one.
Whether or not it's psychedelics, and these are ubiquitous in the environment, which is also a very interesting conversation. Why is it so prevalent everywhere, And so we want to have this bigger conversation about nature. We knew that the local community here, had ayahuasca experiences. There's ayahuasca community, there's DMT community, there's mushroom community, there's cactus community, there's ibogaine community. We're like, let's bring everyone together under this umbrella. And in some places, there's a lot of people where maybe medicinal cannabis hasn't passed yet, or adult use cannabis hasn't passed yet, where they're making very good arguments. Obviously, that cannabis is an entheogen as well and should be incorporated in here. One challenge we have with that is that because there's so much money in lobbying now with that kind of thing, becomes we don't want to sort of get more attention and more fight around this issue, because they're going to come in with full guns blazing, so to speak, trying to stop anything that would take away the power, like you're dealing with in mushrooms or Michigan in terms of the Caregiver Act and limits on plants, all that kind of stuff. It's like, how can you limit a plant? Like who's going to do that, right? So it's just kind of
what's next? My tomatoes?
Yeah, exactly. Or do we have to get a legalization license for breathing air? It's kind of ridiculous, right? So,
you can't collect rainwater, so I mean,
Yeah, right. It's just control, right? Which is ridiculous. So but outside of all that, what I've learned, and this is the two risks that we took when we started off. We're like, okay, we did this thing. Let's kind of just throw it out there and see if the underground community is going to stand up. And sure enough, wow, boom, right away, we're getting all these different people that were interested. And, it's been kind of a whirlwind just even trying to keep up with all the people who are like, yes, because it's different with what we're doing than other folks. It's one thing to sort of vote on a ballot initiative. You have a yes or a no. It's simple. You can even say, well, I just don't think people should be arrested for it, but it keeps you arm's length away from the actual conversation about the transformative potentials or the healing effects or that type of thing. What was really beautiful here, in Oakland and other places as well now, there's actually this beautiful community in Atlanta. If people go to our Instagram, you see this, we have it pinned up at the top there, just a short video of just some of the beautiful testimonials that are happening. And you're talking about education earlier, and that's a really big part of this. Yes, the science exists, but there's some methodological issues, double-blind fallacy, all these other different types of things that happen there. But you can't take away the N of one, the single individual who say, I wouldn't be here today, or I feel much better, I've been healed because of these plant mushroom medicines. And that takes courage, because what you're doing is basically going on record, public record, to say I broke the law, and this is transformative. So it is kind of like, like peaceful civil disobedience, if you will, saying, hey, we're standing up here and tell you that we broke the law, but there's no reason that law should exist, and I wouldn't be here today otherwise. So that's been really beautiful just to see the amount of people standing up across the U.S. who are really behind this, and we knew that, but now just kind of seeing that. And then I think the second thing, which I've been finding has been pretty profound, is how many city council members or other elected officials are either familiar with this, maybe had an experience, maybe know someone else that has had an experience. And, I always tell people, even though it might seem like it's a no-go, you never know what city council member would be like, I'm just waiting for somebody to ask. I can't propose it myself because of the complications of it and the controversy.
Biasness and shit like that, yeah.
If the community comes to me and supports it, then, okay, I can jump in on it. So don't be afraid to ask, because all across the board, almost every city council has had at least one person who is very well familiar with it, or maybe has had or seen healing experiences from these entheogens.
Yeah, so let's talk about the politicians real quick, or the politics thereof. Okay, on the local level, you're right. A lot of these people can't say, "Hey, you should say this." That's not their job. It has to be brought to them as a community, and in some places that's not an issue, but you have to be careful how you approach it, and that's the politics. That's a whole different story. That's not where I wanted to go for it. What I wanted to talk about was this. On the national level, what's the difference between descheduling and decriminalizing, okay, and then full legalization? Because it's happening with weed as we kind of, it's not happening actively, but it's been mentioned, okay? So the idea is there. Here's my view of it, and then I would like a little clarification if you don't mind. Here's what I think. I think that everything that is a controlled substance is actually controlled happiness or therapeutic somehow. Okay, for example, heroin's been used as medicinal purpose. Let's admit that. Too much of it kills you. Let's admit that. Okay, but it has had in the past medicinal purposes. Do we do that no longer? Yeah, it should probably stay a controlled substance, and we know why. Okay, A. B, let's deschedule and create a new schedule if we have to of all these entheogens, mushrooms, anything that's fucking natural, in cannabis included, in something else. Create like a natural organization there where we can, talk about, certain regulations. That's fine too. But the fact is, shrooms have never killed anyone. Okay, mushrooms have, cacti, as far as I know, ayahuasca and shit's never killed anybody. Cannabis never killed anybody. However, they're on the controlled substance list. You know what isn't on the controlled substance list? Fucking mercury. That shit can kill you. Arsenic. That shit can kill you real quick. Not on the controlled substance list. Alcohol. That shit can kill you real quick and has resounding effects in your life.
And on every street corner.
Every single, and here's the thing, I can go out and buy as much alcohol as I can fucking carry. As much as I could buy. I could take out a house loan to buy alcohol for one night. And then joke at the counter, yeah, I'm just going to go drown myself in booze, and they don't give a shit. None. They're like, I feel you, brother, or whatever have you. And that's not okay. Whereas you mentioned weed one time, and that's it. You're locked up for years. You mentioned shrooms, but it's curing people, man, and so
we even joke around and say that there's actually more people that have died taking selfies than all the entheogens combined.
100%. I like unicorns. I'm ad nauseum with unicorn adages there, but I really appreciate the work that you do. And on a serious note, I have had I do microdosing myself. Now, do you microdose yourself? That was the question I was kind of pondering a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Well, right before we get into that, maybe I'll just touch a little bit on the deschedule, decrim.
Yes, please.
Point, which I think is important and something that we're trying to figure out as well. The Controlled Substances Act, obviously, from the get-go, was something that Nixon put together for all the different reasons, as many of your listeners probably know, and a lot of it that even John Ehrlichman was saying, we're trying to go after community leaders that were anti-war in the Black and hippie communities, and so we're going to criminalize the things that they do, and then we're going to go after them. So this is like the quote that's been in all the different news or media orgs. So even that, just speaks to let's just get rid of that whole thing. But what's interesting about the way that was set up, and I don't know if this was forethought on anyone's part or whatever, but basically it's set up to really feed into the pharma industry. Because what's a Schedule I substance? It's, high level abuse, which we know these aren't the case, but it also has no medicinal value. So the strategy for organizations like, for example, the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies was, okay, well, let's prove medical value then. Right, in order to get it off of Schedule I, because they're just talking about rescheduling, not even really descheduling at this point, right? Rescheduling still keeps it in that sort of framework of illegality, but just who can sort of prescribe it, right? So we have now this situation where you have this sort of, it sort of feed, because the only way to get it approved medicinal value is to find a way to synthesize it with a GMP certified product, right? Which means it's going to have to be going through a pharma company, which is going to have to go through the FDA trials, which increases the cost.
Unfortunately, yeah.
The next thing you know, the pharmaceutical companies have something that comes out of a mushroom, and they're selling it back to you for exorbitant amounts. You're looking at $3,000 to $7,000, for retreat centers, for example, in Oregon, right? So that's kind of one thing. Now, what's interesting about the Controlled Substances Act is that then what happens, and we see this with cannabis, is it creates this false dichotomy where we start talking about medical and recreational.
Yep.
And the opposite of medical is not recreational. So I like other places are using terms like adult use and things like that. But it sort of creates this dynamic where it's like, if it's not medical in people's minds, then it's fooling around, or it's high risk, or it's partying, or these types of things. Yes, these things happen. People have had very profound experiences in all those different places, but it creates that dynamic of privileging the medical over any other usage, right? So when we start talking about things like rescheduling, which would be sort of the medical route, moving it down to Schedule 2, which is where bringing things like not necessarily heroin, but like, for example, poppy and coca are both Schedule 2, which is one of the reasons, one of the other many reasons that we don't have that included in the entheogens, because they can be argued to be entheogens as well. Right. But they're in Schedule 2, which means they already have been proven medical value, which means pharma's already kind of behind them. So again, we're not quite, our organization isn't quite set up to fight big pharma quite at this point in time. We're doing it.
Not yet.
We're doing it on a head-to-head kind of level. So that's rescheduling, sort of moving it down on scheduling list. You look at something like LSA, which comes from morning glories, that's Schedule 4, very small fines and things like that, but there are scheduling to it. Then the other one would be sort of decriminalization. And decriminalization is saying, well, it's still on the Scheduling Act, but we're not going to arrest it. We're removing the criminal penalties. Right. And so what that does is it creates a scenario where individuals may be, and this is a conversation we have with some policy people. Does that maybe make it better, the decriminalization route, because it still keeps it for the people, because big corporations can't jump in, because it's still technically illegal on the federal level, and it'd be RICO and trafficking and all that stuff that people with cannabis are dealing with right now, if it's decriminalized. So let's just remove the criminal penalties, which is our approach on the city level, or basically it's a deprioritization and a reallocation of funding away from resources away from any investigation, prosecution, and arrest on the city level. But basically the idea would be that just sort of remove those penalties. Let's not legalize it. Let's just remove the penalties and let people have access to it, just like you would have tomatoes growing in your backyard.
Right. Safe access, yeah.
Right. So the descheduling part would be like to take it off of the schedule altogether. What we've done with a couple of different pieces of legislation that we've been helping to write, including, I think, the Michigan SB 631 and some other ones as well, is to make it so that it's exempt from the Controlled Substances Act, so the statewide controlled substance. We haven't gone to the national level, but the statewide, so it's exempt. So it's not like a descheduling, really, but it's just saying we're exempting this from that scheduling process. Because we thought that was going to be the best way to sort of not have to go through these ridiculous regulations and licensing and all that kind of thing, or having quote unquote task forces. Oftentimes, as I mentioned, I don't know if you heard me when we saw each other at the Michigan rally, but oftentimes task forces can be, enforcement lens or a harm lens. Like, okay, people are going to get really harmed by this, so we need to figure out how to limit and regulate and restrict. And then what we see is then you have, for example, in Oregon, the Oregon Health Authority, which is doesn't know anything about this really, is the one that's creating the rules for it, instead of having it naturally emerge from the community. So our hopes is that by delaying the legalization process, because legalization, again, as we see with cannabis, is really kind of prohibition light. You're okay if you're within the parameters and you have the license and you can pay us the money to do the thing. But if you're outside of that framework, you're called an illicit grower, or, there's all these other things. So what ends up happening there is now you have a situation where, it's still illegal, except for the people who can pay the bill, so to speak,
Pay to play kind of thing.
Yeah, so we're just saying, let's decriminalize, let's remove the criminal penalties first, so it's not illegal if it's done without that particular setting, that everyone can have access to it, whether that's exempting it from the Controlled Substances Act, whether that's decriminalizing, all those different types of things. But then when we get to legalization, to make sure we have that before legalization, so that then sort of the big corporations can't say, oh, you're not buying my product, so I'm going to arrest you. Which is then you give them sort of the power of the law behind their product, which is kind of ridiculous as well, right? So that's kind of the three different layers there. And then I think, then take me back to the question, the original question.
No, you're good. Oh, microdosing, yeah.
So microdosing, I have worked with microdosing a little bit here and there. I don't do it too much though. I find, being in the work of integration, which is basically like the meaning making process. So again, I didn't really touch on this before when I went on a long tangent, but I was in the academic world and also the sort of support world, and then policy just kind of fell in, and then we just kind of been going, since then. But that's kind of my interest. So my interest really is about these profound transformative experiences that people can have, where they go through perhaps a death and rebirth experience or a unitive mystical experience or all these other different types of experiences, which can be super transformative, help people shift their understandings of the world, sometimes, help them move from one paradigm to the next, all these different types of things. And a lot of times when it comes to healing, that can also be really advantageous. So I'm supportive of everybody that's doing microdosing. I think that's great. I'm glad it's working for folks. There's some research right now that's kind of going back and forth, it doesn't work or it does work or blah, blah, blah. But what's most important is the person, does it feel better? So yes, it works, right? So, but then in terms of the broader scale, we have, just as an example, a friend of mine who had, had a lot of challenges with heroin for about 15 to 20 years of his life. He had an experience with ethogenic. And so ethogenic on the very base level also helps the cravings and withdrawals. So like he was like, it finally gave me a window of opportunity after I did it, about 5 to 10 days, where I could sort of rebuild habits, rebuild things I weren't like looking for, heroin and that different type of thing. But he says what was most important about it was not so much the sort of physical aspects of it, but he's like, I was able to go into my traumas that were causing some of the challenges I had with substance use issues, and I was able to watch them again with the emotion volume turned down. So I was able to sort of review those experiences and do the psychological, psycho-spiritual healing that we're talking about related to therapy. Like, this is therapy. We don't need necessarily somebody else in the room that's a human being doing this. The plant,
right.
Really plant consciousness, that what we're talking about is a conversation that's happening between the individual and the plant. So it's
like you kind of got yourself into it, you get yourself out of it kind of thing.
Yeah, well, they're just able to like go and review it again and be like, oh, okay, wow, and not even, because, for example, I can think of ayahuasca experiences that I've had where, like, you think of a scenario that was difficult or challenging or whatever, and you're able to maybe see it from the other person's perspective. Mm-hmm. You're like, oh, I was the asshole, actually.
Compartmentalization. Compartmentalization.
Sure, yeah. Just looking at different individuals and being able to see kind of the different dynamics that are at play, offering forgiveness, offering empathy for the scenario. Maybe it was a shitty situation, but, maybe that person had other things going on, just like a broader understanding, and then a forgiving of self, and then even a rewriting of narrative. Like, well, this doesn't mean that I'm this horrible person, or this doesn't mean that I'm less than, but I am this, divine being, and we're all moving forward in this sort of process. And so there's something about these sort of bigger experiences which can also be really useful for folks. And then, a lot of these bigger experiences are also, like we said earlier, it's about shifting paradigms. Mm-hmm. And, if what we're talking about is, trying to get out of the muck we're in right now related to all the stuff that's going on in the world, sometimes we need to shift paradigms, and we're in this really strong mechanistic worldview and, hyper-capitalism and all that kind of thing. And so maybe it helps to have people be like, okay, wait, there's another way. And I think that's, to me, when I look at these experiences, you have places like DARPA. I'm sure you know about DARPA, right? And DARPA is researching now how to create a psychedelic without the psychedelic experience. Now, everybody that's had these experiences are like, wait, that's like the most important part sometimes, Microdosing definitely can be beneficial. You don't have that sort of threshold experience, but for people that are trying to shift consciousness or shift paradigms, the psychedelic, and make transformation, that type of thing, the psychedelic experience can be, or the ethogenic experience can be really, really profound and powerful. So I could see, DARPA, which is, Military Industrial Complex Central and Intelligence Community Central, saying things about, not wanting that people to have the psychedelic experience. To me is like, okay, well, then we definitely got to bring that psychedelic experience in, because if they're against it, so just little things like that. And, I think that, it's a both and. Microdosing is fantastic. It's great. It definitely can help with the sort of the baseline help and support. But sometimes it's good to go in every once in a while. It's like, you have a splinter and, you just want to get that splinter out. And sometimes the experiences help get that splinter out. And maybe it's going to be raw and vulnerable and feeling a little icky for a little bit, but you have that chance to heal now instead of it constantly sort of bothering you, that type of thing. So that's what these can do on sort of the deeper level. And a lot of these things too, also, like, when people say, this helps me with my depression, right? They're not really asking the second layer of the question in terms of the studies at Johns Hopkins and things like that, which is like, well, what's causing the depression?
No, yeah, you can debate the symptoms all you want, but you need to find the actual catalytic issue, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
So it could be like, well, I'm disconnected.
Soul searching, if you will.
Sure enough, yeah. Disconnecting myself, disconnecting to nature, disconnecting my community. I don't feel like I need to buy.
It's harder when you're ginger.
What's that?
It's harder when you're a ginger, soul searching.
Because
yeah.
I hear you. I used to have a little bit of ginger in my beer, but now I'm turning blonde with age, so you know how that goes.
And listen, I this is stress. You see, this is the color of stress. I'm kidding. No, I'm getting up there, man. And I always make those ginger jokes, and gingers do have souls. They just have gingivitis. That's fine. But the fact is, dude, that's the point of it, man. I'm breaking free. Like I said earlier, I'm fucking for that. Now, the microdosing has such a profound effect on me, and I'm not just saying that as any kind of mental placebo. It actually did. Yeah. And it's fascinating to me that it worked alongside cannabis, because we've been raised since the Reagan era to go, can I take this drug with this drug? And then sometimes those two counteract and you have to take a third drug, and that's how they fucking get you, right? We know the whole story, all right? You ain't got to worry about that with weed or shrooms. You really don't. And I say shrooms to include all mushrooms that I know about now. That's my little kind of compartmentalization, putting it in a neat little box, right, as we want to organize our lives. Sweeping it up, I kind of look at, the mental benefits before the euphoria and the actual experience. Now, I feel personally right now, and I'm sure you can be like, okay, that logically makes sense. I'm building up to allow myself a vacation when I can kind of step away from doing everything to have time for that experience. That to me is worth working towards. You see what I'm saying? So I got to do that. Just the cook in me has to set that vacation time, right? And I figured, what's better than, taking some fucking lemon tech or some fucking, what was it, Amazon or penis envy or whatever, I'm learning the different cultivars. It's amazing, like the basic ones, but I want to push my consciousness, and so I figured to kind of help me undertone so I don't have a bad experience, I think microdosing would work. And so I took a month off. I can tell you there is a profound, a prolific, if you will, difference day and fucking night microdosing. I mean, the only thing consistently that I did, my diet was the same, my sleep patterns were the same, all of my, mental notes were the same. I was growing weed at the time, so obviously I was doing something, you know what I'm saying? And then got the show and everything else, but, nothing really changed in my life, except even my cannabis use didn't change. It remained consistent, you know what I'm saying? I did that on purpose so that I could know, you know what I'm saying? Hey, this is actually affecting me. It is, man. Like you said, it's taking some of the static out of the picture to make it more clear. It's turning down the volume. It's making those minute adjustments to your consciousness so you're able to look at and handle your life. Absolutely, dude. Who wouldn't want that? Oh, that's right. People who want to fucking, demoralize it, demonize it, and weaponize it, or profitize off of it. They want to do, greedy little fucking things, whether it's, the way they want to control it, manipulate it, or the fact that they want to sell it back to you. That's worth protecting.
Yeah, and even something that hasn't even, it's like there's so much quote unquote research that's been done for the last 10,000 years, but there hasn't been like all the questions that they're bringing up now, in terms of like, microdosing may not have the effect that they're, of course, they're, even macrodosing, there's a thing called double-blind placebo fallacy, which is basically like this idea that no matter what, if somebody's having an experience, they're going to know they had an experience, and the person that's sitting with them is going to know they had the experience, and if they're biased, they're going to tend towards saying, oh yeah, this is a positive thing, right? So it's basically impossible in any of this research to even have a double-blind placebo. So even then, getting that down to microdosing, all the methodology is wrong as well in terms of how we understand this. But what's not even being studied about that is the fact that mushrooms, for example, have neuroregenerative properties. So not only are you feeling in a better space, are you able to sort of move things forward, kind of like you say, sort of get the fuzz out of the way, but also, there might actually be effects on the brain and actually you're regenerating neurons that have been sort of dulled down by all
It's making you smarter, dummies.
Sure enough, right? So, that's something that hasn't really been studied in terms of long-term effects of microdosing. But hopefully that'll happen over time.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're doing. That's what we're working for. That's what we're pushing for. I want to know one more thing, man. This Morning Glory LSA thing. This is the first that I've heard of that. Okay. I'm new to most things, that push your conscience. I did them when I was younger. Like you get some Molly or one, you know what I'm saying? Just whatever was available. Half the shit I took, I don't even know. I just did it because it was fun, right? Yeah. And when you were taking mushrooms, there wasn't, you weren't trying to heal something. You were like, oh, looks good to me. Smash, and then, whoo. But you don't know if you're drunk or you don't know which is which. There's too many crossing of the fucking like photon streams, if you will. You know what I mean? Ghostbusters for you. Sure. This LSA Morning Glory, I grow Morning Glories. Is it the same thing? Like, it's the same plant, right?
Yeah, it's especially the heavenly blue Morning Glories.
Okay.
What you do, they because it was just being utilized a lot in the sort of the 70s, if you buy Morning Glory seeds now from the store and we're trying to process them there, supposedly the old wives' tale is that, the companies are putting poison on those so you can't have an experience, blah, 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 so you don't process those seeds. But once you grow them, you have plenty of seeds.
Correct.
So there is a process to sort of process those seeds, and I don't have the specific. I don't know if a disclaimer, not sending out the specific recipe, but I know it's very, very easy.
We're going to mute this part of the show.
Yeah, exactly. But I know it's easy to find online in terms of people that are working with that, or they call it the swim, right? Someone who is in me, or my friend who did this thing, So you're just talking about it from an educational perspective. But there's a way to process those seeds. Which I think is even just simple as like a cold water press and something else. And then from that comes this LSA, which is, very similar to LSD in terms of the...
Is that lysergic acid?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. That's interesting because I wanted to confirm, because I grow Morning Glories. Outside of the studio, we have it wrapping the house, and we had a ton of these. And now that you're telling me that was growing outside of my house this entire time...
It's funny because this is actually exactly one of the points that we're trying to bring up.
Right.
Which is just that we're so unaware the plants that exist in our backyard have these qualities. Here, for example, in the San Francisco Bay Area, you have something like star jasmine. Star jasmine, same sort of thing, grows prolifically. It gets thrown away in dumpsters all the time, landscaping trucks. It's an invasive, plant. It's all over the place. And you see it growing in places like, universities or even school settings, right? I saw Hawaiian baby wood rose, which also has LSA, growing in elementary school settings in Hawaii. We just don't even know,
no idea.
Plants are, but the star jasmine has ibogaine in it. And so, or another one that as on the DMT Nexus, they did this article about, who's the largest producer of DMT in the world? Well, it's orange juice factories or citrus farms, because in the leaves of the citrus trees, there's also DMT. So there's just all the stuff that's all around us that can be, and I think you probably need it on a grand scale. I'm not sure what the percentages are there in terms of the citrus leaves, but
Google it.
But yeah, exactly. But yeah, that also is, so there's just so many plants around that have these things, and we're so unaware of it, So the idea that we need to create a pharmaceutical or a synthetic to create this thing that we could easily grow on a variety of different plants is just, again, sort of, pharmaceutical companies saying, you can't grow your own plants. We need to be the ones that, herbalists all over the place. I even just saw something recently where the FDA is going to have to, the herbalists out there are going to have to deal with more FDA hoops to jump through for, medicinal plants and herbs that have been used for centuries, if not millennia. Now they have to be proven by this organization that can't prove anything, right? They've had a lot of challenges, So this is a conversation in general that we're sort of seeing, sort of nature versus pharma dynamic. And of course, pharma wants you to think that nature isn't useful, or they can make a better one, so that they can, again, like we said, sell it back to you. Yeah, sort of to peel back to LSA, there's a lot of plants on all these different Controlled Substances Act that we can just kind of figure out. And, it's better for us, in terms of environmental movement too, it's better for us to know what's around us. Like, how much more awe and mystery is it when you're like, wow, these plants have things that can help me connect to spirit, or it can help me heal, and they're all around us. Why are we destroying them? Why are we tearing them down? All this stuff, so it helps us get back to the earth and get back to nature and understand that nature is healing.
Dude, I'm with it. And for if this is too much to chew on right now, for my low calorie folks out there, I would start on Netflix and watch Fantastic Fungi. Okay, definitely gives you an introduction to mycelium. Once you do that, it'll tell you to read. What is it? Walking Mycelium, which is Stamos' his book, right?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm probably.
Stay in smoke. Mm-hmm. So you walking, and then that's going to open up your I would say like your conscious, not your conscious, but your knowledge to everything natural, you know, which leads to conversations like this. And then you're going to realize that fucking Decriminalize Nature is killing it, and you're going to support them with that donate button, right? Right, exactly. Right. Hey, y'all, Dr. Larry Norris, doctor. Next time you start with that, don't you? I went through and changed. Dr. Larry Norris, y'all, give it up, man. I really appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, Rodney, and thank you very much. And please reach out, folks out there, if you want to get this started in your city. We'd love to help you out however we can.
Let's get it, y'all. I mean, it's worth doing. Someone's happiness shouldn't be taxed. That's where I'm at with it. Nothing should be taxed, but that's a whole different conversation, y'all. But my tokers, my jokers, my smokers, this has been another well-informed and very crucial, important fucking episode of the Daily Chronicles, y'all. We'll catch you on the flip, y'all. Peace.